We've come up to. Perfect. And that's how we do it. Simple, quick.
Traditionally, we think as police officers, those responding to law enforcement needs within the community. But honestly, we are there to serve our citizens, and our citizens do go into crisis. They do have mental health crises, and we're being called to those scenes on a regular basis. In order to help serve those citizens better, we did initiate the Crisis Intervention Team Program. These are officers that are specially trained to de-escalate crisis situations. Recently, we've brought co-responders onto the scene, licensed qualified mental health professionals housed within our police department, and they respond with those officers directly to those scenes where a crisis is occurring so they can interact with that citizen and get them the help they need right there on that scene.
The co-responders are either a bachelor or master level in a behavioral health related field. They wear plain clothes, they don't carry weapons or anything like that.
I have a police radio that I listen to all day. Listen for, those key words: mental health, behavioral health, crisis.
There's a lot of officers that just call for me. I have my own radio number.
I also have the ability to self-dispatch to them and say 982 is en route.
Officers en route, 914, Armstrong.
So typically I arrive after they've made it safe. I'll make contact and get kind of the rundown, and then I just kind of jump right in.
I'm like, hey, my name's Allison. I'm a mental health professional. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to take you to jail or arrest you.
Sometimes all a person needs is a voice, someone neutral, someone outside that, can listen. I do a lot of safety planning, including family, their support network, who's close to you. If they're home alone, who can come over and hang out with you today? Can we lock away your sharps? Can we put up your meds? Do you need meds? Can we get you over to the urgent care to get you assessed for your medications? Some of them also are like, oh, I'm so glad you came. This made me feel so much better.
Our main goal as co-responders is to, one, get people connected to the services that they need, and also divert from emergency rooms and jails.
And they almost get a different view of the police responding. That lets me know you care and the officers care.
Please, how can we help you?
My husband
In 2020, we had 722 mental health related calls for service. 2022, by that time, 1,479. These mental health related calls for service are increasing. How we're responding to that is increasing the number of crisis intervention team officers we have available, as well as the number of co-responders we have available to respond on these calls.
So what I think is important for the community to know about the co-responder program is that we're here, we exist. All you have to do when you call 911 is ask for us. Say, hey, I want a co-responder to respond to this crisis, and we'll go. I was really struggling about 8 years ago on my personal journey with mental health, and I met some amazing social workers and amazing programs that have helped me get to where I am today. I really couldn't see myself doing anything else. We want to help, and that's what we love to do.
So I had a client, we got a call, she had some suicidal ideations, and she really felt that she had nobody. And and getting to know her story and getting to know who comes around and sees you, well, then we found a support person and they responded immediately. And we made a plan. I called back and checked on her in an hour, and then I checked on her in 2 hours. We were able to get her into the additional services to where she talks to someone every week or more. I just took a person that really just thought they had nobody and nobody would show up for them, and show them you do. And you'll be amazed who is in your corner if you just simply say, I need a little help.
Good questions. Yes, Councilmember Edson.
Since this is a cooperative agreement, is this similar to like when we buy things through the market?
It'd be similar. We don't buy through them.
We moved to Lee Summit right before we had our third child, and we ended up raising all 4 of our children here. And it's been just such a great place to raise kids. Well, I'd been involved in government and politics for a long time, different aspects of it. And then when I was raising my kids, I was very involved in different community organizations and involved with the schools. And as my kids got older, and I saw them and their friends starting to leave the community, I realized that there were some things that needed to be done in order to attract younger people back to Lee Summit, and I wanted to be part of that conversation. We need to work on economic development and keep trying to get more jobs here that pay well so that they will attract our kids. We have this great school system that we're all paying for, and yet our kids graduate and leave. We need to work with the school districts and with the businesses to create an environment that keeps our kids here. We have a great community with great housing, but we also don't have enough housing that is attainable for middle class. People who are just starting in the workforce can't afford to buy a house here at this point in time. If you take your average firefighter and your teacher and they're married, it's very hard for them to buy a house in Lee Summit. So some of my priorities when I ran were economic development, attainable housing, and public safety. When I ran 6 years ago, our police officers and our firefighters were some of the worst paid public safety folks in the metro area. And in the past 6 years, we've done a great job of getting their pay up, getting their benefits up, and now there will be a public safety tax, which will be a game changer for Lee Summit. It will help us to attract and retain new talent for the coming years. All communities are having a hard time recruiting and retaining police and firefighters. So if we can be a place that they want to come and is desirable, it's going to be great for the well-being of our community. We need to make sure that not only are we paying people well, but that we have enough fire stations as the city grows. We need to make sure that we grow the police department. Something else I'm really proud of, the replacement of Fire Station 4 and 5. I started taking council members on tours of Fire Station number 4 to show them how badly a replacement for that station was needed. There are so many opportunities to get involved in this community, whether it's serving on a committee, whether it's participating in the Citizens Leadership Academy, which the city sponsors. It's easy to sit at home and complain and think you understand how it works, and then when you actually understand how it works, you have a better appreciation for it, and you'll want to get involved more. I just wanted to clarify that. I think Hillary did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we should be ready to get started. Let's go ahead and call to order the special meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee. Can we get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
I can.
Chair Shields,
Here.
Vice Chair Lovell,
Here.
Councilmember Hodges is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Lopez is absent. Councilmember Edson.
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. First item on our agenda, which I just need to pull up here, is approval of the agenda. Big surprise. Can somebody provide a motion, please?
Chair, I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lovell, second by Councilmember Edson to approve the agenda. Can we get a vote on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair Lovell,
Aye.
Chair Shields,
Aye.
Councilmember Edson.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. The agenda is approved. Do we have any public comments today?
We do not have any public comments and no members of the public in attendance.
Okay. First item on our agenda then is 2024-6120, approval of the February 5th action letter. Can we get a motion or discussion on that?
Chair, I move to approve the action letter.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the action letter. Can we get a vote on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Edson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lovell,
Aye.
Chairperson Shields.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you. Okay, next item, the main reason we are meeting today is discussion of the general fund reserve balance, which is 2024-6128 on our agenda. Who will be presenting the recommendations for funding that? Mr. Dunning, will that be you today?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. Thank you, Chairperson Shields. So for this discussion item, I think it's very timely. What I'll attempt to do is make sure we're all on the same page about what we're talking about, what the guidelines call for, and then we'll get into really the heart of this, which is the recommendations from the city manager. So what we're talking about here is our general fund unallocated reserve balance. And per ordinance 9757, which revised those guidelines for our general fund unallocated reserve, we are to, within 60 days per these guidelines, within 60 days of our audit, our financial audit, commonly referred to as our ACFR or Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, to provide recommendations to the council on use of general fund unallocated reserve resources if we're over 35% as we calculate our general fund unallocated reserve. So that's at the heart of this. Just to go through those guidelines real quick for everyone's awareness. I'll talk about a floor and a ceiling. So per the guidelines, we're to maintain a 25% floor general fund reserve balance for emergencies and for economic stability. So that's the floor as we consider this. And these calculations are based on which is greater, our revenues or our expenditures from the previous fiscal year. So 25% is the floor. The ceiling, the maximum, is 35%. Then the policy also says that if we're between the 25% and the 35%, that floor and that ceiling, the council may appropriate funding between those percentages based upon action by the council. Now, if the general fund unallocated reserve is above the 35% ceiling, then within 60 days from that financial audit, the city manager shall bring forth recommendations. And that's why we're here having this special meeting. We appreciate you taking the time to do this. So that's what we're talking about, is the general fund unallocated reserve balance, which is above the 35% ceiling. Currently, our unassigned, unallocated general fund reserve balance is 46.5%. So what that means, that total is 44.5 million. When we think of, okay, what's the ceiling? What that tells us, based on the calculations, is we have a little over 11 million over the 35% ceiling. So this is the start of the city manager reporting, what are some ideas and recommendations to consider for utilizing those resources, making investments in this community or the organization. So within the packet, well, let me say this. We somewhat started these discussions on February 6th, actually, when we brought forward a financing ideas for the downtown market plaza. So timing of this is spot on. It kind of ramped it up for us sooner than the 60 days. So as you see in your packet there, downtown market plaza is one recommendation for consideration. I truly feel that is a transformational project that the whole community and certainly the downtown benefits from. Fits squarely within a lot of our master planning, especially our downtown master plan. And it fulfills many objectives and initiatives and goals of those plans. And as we talked about at the February 6th meeting, staff went in with the presentation being 5 million potential utilization. And through the discussions, we ended up saying, well, it could be anywhere between 5 and 10 million. So within your packet, you see that range there for the downtown market plaza. And Chair, if you'd like for me to pause on each one of these ideas, I'd be happy to do that. Or if you want me to run through thoughts, I could do that as well.
Hey, Chair.
Councilmember Edson, did you have a comment? Yeah.
Yeah. Hang on. I'm trying to figure out if what I'm looking at is what he's talking about. When you're talking about the packet, I've got the ordinance. I don't see any reference to the downtown market plaza. Mark.
Okay.
So maybe we can share a screen when we go through those. Do you have, should we just pull up the agenda item, or do you have a presentation you want us to do, Mark?
I can pull up, let me get to a document here. I actually incorporated this into the packet, the actual packet. It's not an attachment. They're bullet points.
Yes, it's in the text. It's in the text of the item for consideration that has a list of possible funding priorities.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think it'd be helpful to throw that up on the screen while we're talking.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, this, at least the document that I've got real quick may not show these ranges, but it's the one I could get to the quickest. So can everybody see?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I put the range in there, and I could actually type that in there just so we're clear on, we'll say 5 million to 10 million. So that's the first one that comes to mind, and we talked about that on February 6th. Some other ideas that myself and actually we discussed at management team that we felt rose to a priority to bring forward. So these ERPs, we have many of them. We have our building equipment replacement program, vehicles, that's our VERPs, our MERPs, which is our computers and technology. And then we also have one for our software and licensing. So we have various ERPs, as we'll call them. And you may know that we're going through an audit on our ERPs. Really, these are asset management programs for these various assets that we maintain. And as we go through that audit, we as staff feel that there's going to need to be some resources put to those to shore them up. As you could imagine, in times of belt tightening, one way you can stretch your dollars is to extend the life of vehicles and other equipment and things like that to save costs. But really, that's just you're not funding toward replacement. You're deferring that, and at some point in time, that catches up with you. So our thought right now is there 3 million is just there's no scientific, number crunching behind that. It's just a feeling of what might be necessary, we'll say, to shore up those ERPs based on this audit. And I want to make it clear. So these are thoughts that it's not like we need to invest $11 million in these ideas right away, right? We need to me, we're building a plan to utilize this funding towards investment that we feel are a priority. So that is one that the ERPs, we can certainly wait until the audit comes out and we see those recommendations, but we want to be mindful that staff feels that we're going to need to shore some of those up so that we're on a better path with asset management. So that's where we're putting in there $3 million as a consideration right now. The next one, gateway monument. So we know we have a gateway monument on the west side of town. We have one on the north side of town. And we don't have one on the south and the east. So a thought here is, just for awareness, we were able to accomplish those other two gateways that are currently constructed in partnering with the Lee Summit Industrial Development Authority. And the IDA, I'll refer to it as the IDA. The IDA still has an offer for matching grants to construct the south and the east gateway. Those amounts that they're willing to match are $60,000 a piece. So $120,000 total towards two gateway monuments to balance out the city and have those community gateways at every quadrant of the city. Now, when we constructed those other two gateways, the costs varied between the two. We as staff feel that if we were to try to, well, I can tell you the View High gateway at that time was a little north of $120,000. The one at Lakewood was north of that. So what we've put in here is best guess 300 to, I need to update this, 300 to 500,000 total to accomplish those two gateways. Now that's not considering 120,000, right? That the IDA is still offering to match some grants here. So that's just a range for two gateways. Any questions on that one? Okay.
It doesn't work. Just continue.
Okay. The next one would be audio-visual systems here in City Hall. We know we're not up to speed in many of our conference rooms, council committee room being one of those for virtual capabilities and things of that nature. And we do have a variety of AV systems in various conference rooms here at City Hall. So we want to recognize that through the no tax increase bond issue, there is funding available for renovations to City Hall. But that's at least a couple years out as we program no tax increase bond initiatives. So our thought at management team is, would it be worthwhile to invest in updated audio-visual systems in City Hall during that time frame, with the thought that those systems could be repurposed as we renovate City Hall? Really, do we want to continue to experience some pain with these systems until we do the full renovation, or should we make some investments now so that those AV systems better support our work? So that's a thought on the audio visual systems. You see then the compensation study, and while it's been years since we did a compensation study, and what we've put in place since that study is we have a compensation specialist here in City Hall that helps us stay more up to date with market and where different positions and our compensation and benefit plans. It has been years since we've really gone out and said, have we done a good job of keeping up with our compensation and our salary ranges? So there's a thought that we bring forward a compensation study. That'd be, I should mention it, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but the use of unassigned general fund reserve should be limited to one-time costs. We should not be funding ongoing costs through these resources. So this is one, a compensation study would be one that would be one-time costs. I should also let you know that there's been a big organizational effort to look at what we call attraction, satisfaction, and retention of our workforce. This was a citywide effort, employees generating ideas on what kinds of things could we look at to make sure that we're attracting, we're retaining and creating satisfaction within the workforce. So it was a big effort to look at our organizational culture, organizational development, and those types of things within the organization. This is one of those priorities that came out of that effort, is looking at doing a compensation study. So that's what that one entails. So the Browning land and improvements, what that idea is down near the public works operations in our central vehicle maintenance facility. The property just north of that on Hamblin Road, I want to say, somebody could correct me here, but I want to say it's about 70 acres. The landfill actually purchased that property so that we could have cover for the landfill. We scraped the dirt off that property, and that's what's capped the landfill. So technically, the landfill trust fund owns that property. And that there's a reason for that, because there's value in that property, and we have to create the funding for 30 years for the post-closure fund per MDNR. So that's an asset currently, we'll say, owned by the landfill, the solid waste trust fund. What we have been doing as staff is trying to envision with that property, what happens with it. And we've put some initial thoughts to long-term needs that the city may have for that property, and we've come up with some. Everything from expansion of our public works operations. There's needs on the water utilities side for that property. There's certainly parks interest, because that property backs up to an existing park. There are needs for drivers training. If you think about the East Apron that was there where we used to do the snow rodeos up by the airport, we don't have that opportunity anymore, because the east side of the airport is going to be undergoing development. So we don't have this big expansive pad of concrete to do drivers training in the sense of snow rodeos, some of our fire and EMS types of training that we do. So there are improvements that we could envision seeing occurring with that Browning property, and not offering that property up to the private sector. Our thoughts right now is we could do this in a way where a portion of that land could be reserved for our ongoing public uses, and carve out, I think it was about 10 acres along the frontage on Hamlin that we could then still offer up for private development. So what you see there is a $3 million number. What that $3 million would represent is if we chose to use general fund revenues to purchase that property from that solid waste trust fund, what that would do would make the solid waste trust fund whole for that 30-year post-closure financing. The general fund would then own the property, and then through other ways we could make those investments as we best determine long-term needs for the city and what types of uses may occur on that property. So that's what's represented there for $3 million, would simply be the acquisition of the property from the solid waste trust fund. There's one that I need to that came up that is not in your packet, and this is the last one that I'll share with you. And so there's a thought about, with our downtown festivals, I will say we are still concerned about security and safety for our downtown festivals in the way of barricades and things of that nature. And right now we use water-filled barricades to put along the streets to block them off. One thought is we could utilize funding to install removable bollards within the street systems. Staff doesn't feel that these mechanical bollards where you could flip a switch and raise them up and lower them, there's many maintenance challenges with that, but it is possible that we could look at, basically, to simplify it, drilling holes through the street, putting sleeves in it, and when needed, bring out the bollards, pull the cap off the sleeve, put the bollards in when we don't need to block off streets. You pull them out, you put the cap on, and it's no different than a street. I would say there's numerous areas and different perimeters we would need to consider in doing that. Be very strategic with where we put those, but that's another thought that is not represented in these numbers, but we thought it rose to the level that we should share that with you too as a thought. So those are the ideas, recommendations we have at this point. And again, it's not like we need to figure out how to allocate and invest $11 million right now. Quite honestly, the one project that is pushing this discussion along is the downtown market plaza, because that is the project that we need to consider and solve for at sooner rather than later. But then we can certainly do more research. We can wait for the ERPS audit to come out. But that's the package that I wanted to share with you of ideas and recommendations we have right now.
Thank you, Mr. Dunning. For the bollards idea, do you have an approximate cost range for something like that?
No, we're going to need to put some more work to that. More research is needed, because what we haven't put together is those different perimeters and where they might go and what kind of costs are associated with that. So that one we need to do more research on.
Okay. All right. Would I be able to share my screen? So I put together a spreadsheet that I thought would kind of help guide the discussion a little bit as well. Okay, so I've put together what I'm showing here is kind of the allocations that were presented in our packet on the low end, on the high end, what those would total, and then showing what levels of fund balance we can consider maintaining. So if we just spend down to the 35% cap, that would mean maintaining or being able to spend $11 million and change. If we wanted to do that 30% level that we talked about as being kind of a soft target for maintaining our AAA bond rating, that's this $15.8 million amount. And if we spent all the way down to the 25% floor that we've set, that's about $20 million. So as you can see up here, if we did the low end of the allocations that were discussed, that's $11 million, a little bit over. That's right about hitting that 35% cap. If we went all the way up, that'd be a little bit over that 30% level, but we can kind of decide, do we want to talk through all of these? Do we want to just talk through the downtown market plaza? But that kind of gives just a framing, I think, of what some of those choices might mean in terms of what kind of a fund balance we're maintaining. So do we have discussion from members of the committee on how you want to conduct this discussion, or any priorities that you'd like to see funded, or what are your thoughts?
Mr. Lovell, you're a committee member. You want to chime in, or you want me to go? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead if you've got something immediately. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm okay with actually going to 30%. 25 I'm a little iffy about. I appreciate staff putting this list together. I think this is a good list. I think there's a nice balance of kind of needs and wants, and I think you focus more on needs. How do you've got the downtown market plaza varying from 5 to 10. If we say, well, let's just allocate 5, then what are we not paying for?
So I think that, and I would let staff chime in on this as well, but I think that kind of goes back to the discussion that we had at the prior council meeting in front of full council, where it's just a matter of how much are we taking out in terms of bond financing, and what that means to our annual finances in terms of the debt service payments. So I can't quote those numbers off the top of my head, but I think we did kind of go through it. It's just a matter of how much do we borrow and how much do we pay in cash.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I really would rather not go down to 25%, but I'm comfortable at 30. So, and good call on the ballards. When they installed those down at the Capitol building in Jeff City, they did not take into account that it snows and freezes here, and they had to replace them the first time because they wouldn't come back up. Yeah. So yeah, probably not doing the mechanical ones is a good call. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, Councilmember Lovell, please.
I think I'm probably leaning towards, just because this is the first year that we've implemented this tool, I would be more on the 35% side, just for, I don't know, abundance of caution. I mean, I think for me, it's trying to understand where it gets a little is, so like we have, so like when we're going in for budgeting, we have revenues that we're predicting, right? And then we have expenses that align with that. So regardless of what we do, like with the cap, I mean, that money, here's this money, and then how we allocate it. I think obviously we've got to figure out that delta on the downtown market plaza, right? Like how we allocate that, and then issuing debt. And so I guess, the only thing I think of is what is the volatility of our revenue sources, and anything that may or may not significantly change. Because what I want to make sure is we don't do something that causes undue harm or stress on us through the year. Like property taxes. What if there is a significant adjustment or change? And I guess it's me just understanding how our revenues are predicted and then how we collect them. But what if here was where our levy was set, here's what we think we're getting in property taxes 6 months down the road, they change that, it goes back, and we're getting significantly less, and we've issued debt, and we've drawn down our reserve balance. Again, not saying that would happen. I'm just always saying, like, let's think of worst case scenario, or if something significantly changed, are we okay, right? I think that's what I would want to know as a taxpayer or business owner or anybody, is like, hey, if we're going to go do this and we're going to issue some debt with a bond and we're going to draw down on this balance, is there anything out there, any potential bogeys out there, and how would we account for those based on the volatility of our revenue? So I think we've got sales tax and you've got property tax. Sales tax, that one's probably harder to predict, but we also may have this thing with the property tax. So just again, abundance of caution, and this being a new thing, I think I would probably lean towards the 35%, and then figure out how we allocate that. And then, figuring out what kind of debt service we would need, especially for the downtown market plaza. So that's just my initial thoughts out of the gate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilmember Lovell. And I feel like from a lot of our discussions on this committee and at council as a whole, that we do pretty conservative estimations of revenue and expenses to try to make sure that we are well within those and we're kind of prepared for hardships. I do feel like we prepared this policy to make sure that we'd still have a pretty substantial cushion in the case of having some kind of unexpected issues. That where we're at in terms of our fund balance right now is well ahead of where comparison municipalities are. Is my understanding that it's unusual to have this high of a fund balance, and that keeping that 30 to 35% keeps us in a very good place. But I definitely can understand wanting to stay, above that 30%, and because we don't know what other unexpected expenses can come up too. And so I think that's not unfounded. To me, the kind of the balancing question is, how does this get eaten away by inflation? How is there less that we can do with it next year than we could do with it this year? So that's kind of what I'm trying to balance. But I don't know that between 30 and 35% that there's a huge trade-off. So I'm okay with either of those. I'm not really strongly in to one side or the other. But I think that's kind of what we're balancing is the security of having this additional cushion versus the fact that taxpayers have given us this funds and they kind of get eroded away year by year if we don't spend them. So if we're looking at maybe that 35%, 30%, somewhere in there, so that gives us about $11 to $15 million that we're talking about. What are your thoughts on how much of that we should allocate to the downtown market plaza? Somewhere it's between 5 and 10 million is kind of what staff put in as a placeholder, and I think that's sort of what we had discussed at the whole council meeting. But what are your feelings in terms of how much of that to put in there? And I don't know if Ms. Wordleman or any other member of staff might want to chime in with if you have any recommendations about what would be a comfortable amount for us to finance versus putting in as cash. I know we talked about in the other meeting that we've got a lot of funding capacity as a city, but obviously we don't want to do anything irresponsible. So is there any staff feedback before we have discussion, or should we just hop right in with council members?
I think in many ways, when I think about this list, and I see Ryan popping up here, but I think I owe it to you to and maybe this is where Ryan, you were going to go, or Betty, But if we really, what we're talking about is how do we allocate this funding? And when I think about our ERPs, we would be allocating whatever amount it's an investment in assets, right? And so it's not like it leaves the organization. And how does that equate to our fund balance and our AAA bond rating? I think about the ERP line item, and I also think about the Browning property and improvements, right? Those are investments in assets that still has value. So those two are a little different than investing in a project or an initiative. So I did want to make that point. And I'll also make the point too, these are ideas that some of these smaller amounts, right? Is there a way to incorporate into our annual budgeting too? So I did want to make those known. Those are on my mind and share that with the committee. And I see Ryan popped on there. So Ryan, you want
to? Yeah, thank you. So I was just going to briefly discuss kind of the downtown market plaza and kind of a refresher of some of the numbers that we had discussed. So really with the Market Plaza budget overall in this conversation in particular, the question is how much do we finance versus how much do we pay in cash? And the numbers that our financial advisor provided us are that for every $1 million that we finance, we'll have an annual debt service of about $70,000 per year. So that kind of puts it into perspective a little bit as to what that is. And the number that we were looking at that to solve for, if you will, was about the $24.1 million of what would need to be funded through a combination of cash infusion today and special obligation bonds. And I'll see if I miss anything from Mr. Bushek or Ms. Wordleman.
No, that sounds right.
Just one comment. Well, I guess a couple of comments. I wanted to remind people that as far as these dollar amounts related to the AAA bond rating, that of course, as you may recall, that's not the only variable that determines our bond rating. It is one of the more significant ones, but the 35% is not a guarantee of the bond rating. There are many other variables, but at this point in time, all those other variables are strong for us. So it looks good for us, even if we drop down to the 30%. The other point that I want to mention is that any of these plans, if we obligate the money, if we officially adopt a plan to obligate the money, it would go into a category of fund balance where it's obligated until it's actually spent. So if we don't actually expend the money in the current fiscal year, it would remain a part of obligated fund balance, not a part of unassigned like we're calculating on, but it would still be a part of fund balance and would therefore still count toward our AAA bond rating. No, I had another point I was going to make that I've lost now. But so it would be in an obligated category of fund balance. With it being in that category, however, a future council could unobligate it. So it's obligated until it's not, so to speak. So I just wanted to make you aware of those couple of points.
Thank you, Ms. Orleman. Thank you, staff. So I guess my only other question is, for any of these items, are there any other than just general revenues down the line, are there any other funding sources available? Like, I don't know if community gateway monuments would fall into community marketing or something that might, like the same funding stream that for the DMO or something like that, or is that really not? I just want to make sure we understand, are there other options that we're not considering, or is this really the way to fund it?
So to answer your question directly, yes, there would be other funding sources. I think about our capital improvements plan, right? But now we're competing with those true overall public needs from an infrastructure. So if I were to compare say the gateway monuments to, a lot of our infrastructure, right? They probably would not rise to the priority to be considered. But there are other funding sources. Certainly, we could explore those too.
Thank you. Okay, so that's a lot of good context and kind of background information. So I kind of bring it back to the members of the committee. What are your feelings about how much to allocate towards the Market Plaza or any of these other priorities? Obviously, with the Market Plaza, we could spend all of our balance all the way down to the floor, and we would still have some funding needs there that we would have to bond. So there's a lot of range of options there. And do we, how much do we want to put into that versus all of these other wants and needs? So I'm happy to start throwing up some numbers here so we can start kind of getting a feel for, where different scenarios get us. But yeah, how deep do we want to get into this? What do you guys want to accomplish today?
Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, I'm assuming, what the city has laid out here is kind of, I don't want to put words in their mouth, like how they would like to see it allocated. Like, obviously, like picking a favorite child here for us, I want to make sure that, we're making sure that we're also in line with what the city wants. The other thing I was going to say is, and I think Mr. Elam mentioned this in our last meeting, we'll get like the final contract number on downtown. I think we don't have a meeting next week, but maybe the week after that. And so, I'm good with the way it's, well, I guess, what if that changes a little bit lower or a little bit higher to like, should we go by percentage or should we say like, we might need to have another meeting once we know exactly what that contract is? Or, I know you felt pretty confident that that number was going to be pretty close to what you presented to us. I'm just asking, should we see what that final number is, then come back, allocate accordingly and plan to issue the debt or whatever, especially for the downtown Market Plaza? Or should we try to go ahead and assign a number and hope it ends up being what we thought it was going to be? Or what are your thoughts there?
Sorry, I'm not sure if that was a question directed towards me or towards the chair. I apologize.
Well, I think it's to staff. So whoever wants to answer that, like, or chair, I would guess everybody would probably want to chime in.
Well, chair, if it's all right, I can go ahead and give an initial answer on that with some facts.
Yeah, please do. And part of why we're having this special meeting is to make sure we're hitting the deadlines that the city needs to have an idea of how to accomplish this. So please go ahead.
Yeah. So Councilmember Level, you're correct. We will have GMPs 2 and 3 on the council agenda for February 27th. So we're preparing those packets right now. So as far as being able to have the final numbers, we will have those on the 27th. An option that we could do is again take those final numbers and run through a limited range of what that impact would be, and then that could go to be discussed at the full council that evening on the 27th, or it could be discussed at another finance and budget committee meeting. I think for our purposes, we have already issued the council has already approved the resolution for the intent to issue the bonds. So within the next I'll say a couple of weeks is the time frame that we're really working with to move forward with the bond issuance, which does have about a 3-month time frame, I believe, associated with it. So let's say our drop dead to not delay things to move that forward would be, say, the middle of March at this point from a timing perspective overall. But with that, yeah, we could definitely pull together really kind of whatever information would be helpful in assisting with making the decision.
Thank you, Mr. Elam. So it seems to me that the best thing that we could do as a committee would be to come up with some preliminary recommendations, because we're not going to allocate this money ourselves. It's going to go to the full council for discussion, but they asked us as a committee to put forward some recommendations. So I think it would be good if we could put together some numbers here, and then, but with the understanding that there will be some more discussion at council, and that if things change through this bidding process, that staff can come back and say, you know, here's what was discussed at committee, but we may need to tweak a little bit based on where some of these final bids come in. But I think it's good for us to get some of that work done up front to have some approximate numbers that then we can discuss as a council. Does that sound good to you guys? Okay. So I'm going to start throwing up numbers, and you guys can tell me if you don't like them, if you want to just not fund a category, or if you do want to fund it, or what. So we're just going to throw in 7 million, add an extra zero there, since that's kind of halfway between those. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, make it 700,000. You hit it at 700,000, Hillary. With less.
I did.
That's one way to stretch these out, isn't it?
Yeah, you want to watch the mayor panic? Put 700,000 right there.
Okay. So, I mean, that seems to me like a reasonable number based on what staff has brought forward and what we've talked about. Do you guys want to go up or down?
Well, let's keep going. Let's keep going through the
Okay.
list, and then, yeah.
So the equipment replacement programs, it sounds like that's something that's going to end up needing funding one way or another eventually. So I think it'd be good to go ahead and account for it. Do we want to account for that as the number that staff has thrown out?
I do, because it's so easy to get behind on those. It's so easy.
Same.
Community, sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Lovell.
No, I agree.
Okay. Community gateway monuments for the south and east highway corridors. To me, this is not a huge amount of money, and it would be a nice thing for our city, and it's definitely the kind of thing that's hard to prioritize otherwise, because there's always important infrastructure projects. So it's the kind of thing that it makes sense to say, okay, we have some extra money left over, let's do this. But that said, it's not, nothing's going to break down in the city if we don't do it. So what are your thoughts on that? Councilmember Lovell?
I mean, I think you said it best. It's like I could see both sides of, you know, I guess it would depend on where we end up on some of the, like, I think of the Browning property improvements, like what's that number going to be? And then what does that leave us left over, I guess, for the community gateway monuments? But I don't know that I have a strong opinion either way.
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing that we could not allocate funding for this year, do these projects, do some of these big projects, allocating money for the farmers market and the Browning property, and come back to it in a couple of years. It's not gonna, the city has been chugging along just fine without them. I think that we would continue to prosper, but it is kind of thing it'd be nice to have eventually. So should we leave that unfunded for the moment, or do you guys want to put in some allocation for that?
I'm fine leaving it blank for now.
Yep, me too.
All right, audiovisual enhancements for City Hall conference rooms.
Yes.
I would tend to agree. It's not a huge dollar amount, and it's important that those meetings all function the way they need to. Councilmember Lovell, do you have any objections?
Good.
Okay. Compensation study, $300,000 to $500,000. When when was the last time we did a study like this? You probably said, and I apologize, but I missed it.
Yeah, I believe it was 2018 or 19. And I should share with all of you that we did put some funding in this year's budget to do I'll call it a review rather than a full-fledged study. So there is some funding available for that, but not a full-fledged, what I'll call a study, an in-depth study. So there is, I wanted to create that awareness that we do have some funding, but it wasn't to this extent to do a full-fledged study.
And how would you feel about not having that funded for a year or two? Is that something that you think that you really need the data now, or would what you're doing, the review right now, be sufficient for a little while?
yeah, we know from an organizational perspective that is a priority. That is something that we could certainly plan on funding as part of our budget preparation. So there are, you know, that's a discussion that we could continue to have. It's not like we need a decision or a recommendation on that right now, and that's with many of these, right? I think the project that's pushing this discussion is that downtown market plaza, but it's fair to say what other needs or desires are out there. So,
Okay. Councilmember Lovell, did you have a comment on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really big number for a compensation study, and I just don't have enough context to it. Sounds like you might have some budgeting set aside. I would rather leave that unfunded for now and look towards it, the Browning property improvements, and that'd just be my kind of personal opinion.
Councilmember Edson, do you have any objections?
No, I don't. And Mark, it would be helpful if I know you've got this somewhere. At some point, you go back and look at what it cost last time.
yeah,
I think it was $250, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I want to say
And just maybe more context as to how elaborate it is and all the detail that you get. Just would feel better to kind of know what that looks like. And
and then the Browning property and improvements.
Well,
I'm not really. I don't have a really strong opinion to offer off the bat, so I would love to hear it from the committee.
well, I think this is the most difficult one because this is something we don't see, we don't have any familiarity with, but staff does. So we're really going off them, which is fine. What if we have that? What if we do 1.5? 1.5 now and fund the rest later, or I'm trying to stay at your 35%.
So maybe that's a question to Mr. Dunning. If you had partial funding at this point, would that allow you to acquire the land and start some more planning, or what's kind of the floor to be able to start making progress on it versus completing the project?
Yeah.
And Mr. Elam, you turn on your.
So this one is the solve for number for the solid waste trust fund is really around that 3 million, right? So that's what it would take to acquire the property from the trust fund. That would not include any of the improvements that we may envision. And I think we owe it to you to help you better understand and visualize what kind of needs and how that may look from a site plan perspective. So to me, we owe you more information on that one. We haven't pulled all that together and shared that with you, but that's at least the thought that was behind that project. So this one and the ERPs, I know we owe you more information on. Certainly the comp study too, what's that look like? So these were really just, since that February 6th meeting, pulling together some information just so we could have this dialogue.
Okay. So if we were not to allocate funding to that one or to the bollards for the festivals, that puts us at just over 10 million. So that's well within that 35% cap. So we could do this for now and ask staff to come back with some more information about the unfunded items and some more detail about the equipment replacement program, and then maybe have another meeting focusing on this at finance and budget in a couple of months to talk about maybe some more priorities, but maybe send this to council to say, here's kind of our initial recommendations, but we'll have some supplemental ones later on. Does that sound like a good path forward to the committee, to staff? I'm happy to hear opinions.
that sounds good.
Yeah. From a staff perspective, I like that, because then we can get smarter on some of these others as the audit comes out on the ERPs and we share more information with you. I think we're meeting the guidelines that we're having this discussion within 60 days from the audit. And like I said, really the one that we really need to start solving for immediately is the downtown market plaza. But having awareness of these other things that we may want to put resources to or invest in is good to know.
Chair.
Oh, mhm.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, this was just kind of a comment, maybe just moving forward, like as we, we'll have opportunities to do this again, obviously, you know, assuming the fund balance grows. The only thing I was thinking is like a couple things jump out at me is like, you know, is there any way to allocate percentages to, and I know it changes, but like, you know, is there something with public works? Like, I mean, maybe that's part of the Browning property or whatever, but you know, I think of critical infrastructure needs within the city that are unfunded or like I know we have bonds and things like that and capital CIP, but you know, just trying to think. One thing I just thought of, and it's probably too far out, but like as we're doing the 3rd Street improvements, you know, one of the things I heard about burying the power lines was that, you know, that was cost prohibitive. But if there were funds to assign to that, we felt like that was a good feature to do as we're redoing that. Like there might be an opportunity, again, not saying we could now as far along as that is, but just thinking ahead of ways that, you know, we can allocate these funds to take care of special needs or projects that, you know, are generally based to kind of improve what I consider like more out facing to the community and the citizens and the taxpayers, and less maybe internally and more kind of outward facing. But just something, I don't have the answer. It's just kind of throwing something out as a talking point, maybe down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, those are good thoughts. And maybe one question to staff would be, what's the most effective way for a council member to maybe present some possible priorities? Like we don't want you to go and do weeks and hours and hours and weeks of research on something just because we toss out a random idea, but like to give you, is there a good way to say, hey, here's some things that we're kind of thinking about. Do you have any thoughts on these? Is this something that it would be practical to fold into something like this? What would be the best way to have that dialogue? Would it be some discussion time at a council meeting? Would it be emailing to city manager? What's a good way to start that discussion of some other possible priorities that maybe aren't on this list?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think once to the point, this is the first time we've put this in motion, and I like what we're doing, having the committee consider this and start to develop this list of ideas. As we know, this will be coming forward on February 27th, if memory serves me correctly, Ryan. So this starts the discussion with the council, really, and then as we have that discussion, if there are other ideas that you all have, I think it's appropriate to bring that forward during that time or council comments. And then what would be helpful for us as staff is to know, is that a sentiment shared amongst the majority, or we put time, effort, and resources behind it? So we could proceed in that fashion is what feels right to me.
Okay, does that work for everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Dunning, after this meeting, would you maybe send an email to the full city council just saying that this will be a topic on this future meeting, and it was brought up that council members could bring up other projects that might be priorities for them, just so that people have a chance to think about it ahead of time and kind of organize their thoughts before that meeting?
Yeah, absolutely, we'll do that.
Okay. All right. If these allocations look good to everyone, and I think we feel comfortable with the path forward that we have right now in terms of recommending this for council, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that I can see everything else. If I can figure out, there we go, there's the button. Okay, so we had that full discussion. Do we need any kind of motion or other direction, or has this discussion and the consensus we've achieved, is that sufficient for you, for staff?
I feel that this is adequate. I don't think we need a formal motion. This is idea and recommendations that we carry on and really inject it into the Downtown Market Plaza financing, but knowing that it's a larger discussion than just that project.
Okay. Awesome. Next item then is roundtable. Do we have any roundtable from the committee?
No.
All right. I don't see any roundtable from staff.
No, not at this time.
All right, then we will adjourn this meeting at 12:56. Thank you all for taking time for this extra meeting. I appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.